everyone, and welcome to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Bobby Regan, Chair of the Friday Forum Board and producer of today's program. I am also a former longtime public school board member, so I'm especially excited to welcome our panelists here today. For more than 100 years, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people have come together to find solutions to our region's biggest challenges. Today, we're a diverse network of people who are eager to learn, connect, and share ideas for a better Oregon. Thank you for joining us at the Sentinel Hotel, where thousands of people are watching, listening in, and participating by radio, TV, and online. Listeners are here via X-Ray FM's website and radio stations, 107.1 FM and 91.1 FM. Live viewers are watching us on KGW's website, Facebook feed, and news app. And TV viewers will watch the recording of today's program via Open Signal's community media television stations. We are incredibly grateful for the support of our media partners in bringing Friday Forum to our community. In addition to City Club's valued media partners, our sponsors, volunteers, and staff enable us to put on Oregon's best civic programs week after week. I want to give a special thanks today to Miller, Nash, Graham, and Dunn, and to Hilltop Public Solutions for sponsoring today's forum. Please join me in showing our appreciation to everyone who has made this event possible. Now to today's program. In May, voters across Oregon will have the opportunity to open their ballot and vote for the best candidates to serve on their local school boards. These positions are volunteer roles, and there is no elected position that is quite as up close and personal, and, in my opinion, as important and fulfilling as this one. The need for strong and diverse leadership is greater than ever as Oregon continues to wallow at the bottom of the country when it comes to student achievement. Oregon has the second worst highest high school graduation rate in the country. Take that in. Our graduation rates for students of color are particularly dismal, despite determined efforts over the past decade or more to change this reality. We can and must do better. Last November, voters across this nation elected the most diverse cohort of freshman members to Congress. Many believe this could be a game changer in terms of policies and budget prioritization at the national level. In Oregon's upcoming May elections, we have the opportunity to elect the most diverse cohort of new school board members across this state. We can all help by encouraging friends and colleagues of color to consider running for their local school board and then giving them whatever support we can through Election Day and beyond. The filing period to run for local school boards is now open. The deadline to file is Thursday, March 21st. Our panel today is made up of members of the Oregon School Boards Association School Board Members of Color Caucus, representing 4 different school boards across Oregon. I look forward to hearing why they chose to serve, why they hope more community members of color will step up and run for their local school boards, and why they and so many others believe that having more diverse leadership and education will lead to more positive student achievement outcomes. Anthony Medina is a school board member and vice chair of the Woodburn School District, which currently enrolls the highest percentage of students of color in Oregon. He works as a university policy analyst for the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. Helen Ying is a school board member with the Multnomah County Education Service District. Education service districts across Oregon assist their member school districts in a variety of ways, including the provision of services to extremely high-need students. Helen's professional career spans 30 years as a mathematics teacher, high school counselor, high school vice principal, and hearings officer. Donna Tyner is a member of the Beaverton School Board. She is the corporate risk manager for the Greenbrier Companies with 36 years in the insurance and risk management field. And Bill Grapp is vice chair of the North Marion School Board, a former mayor of Aurora. He is a project development engineer at Mentor and has worked in the semiconductor industry for 40 years. Thank you all for being here with us today, and special thanks to Bill, who will moderate today's discussion.
Thank you all for coming. As Bobby mentioned, I'm Bill Grau, president of the Oregon School Board Members of Color Caucus. OSBA is a statewide association supporting 1,300 volunteer elected school board members across Oregon. Our caucus is a network of OSBA school board members who self-identify as a member of color. Associate members are school board members who wish to participate in discussions with the caucus but who do not identify as a member of color. The core value of the caucus is to promote equity education, quality education for all students, focusing on the needs of students of color. Some of our goals are to promote positive relationships among school board members of color, their communities, political leaders, and OSBA. To build and increase capacity of school board members of color and support a pipeline of people of color to run for school board seats. To develop, promote, and advance legislation to improve educational opportunities and outcomes for students of color. The leadership of the statewide caucus is led by an executive team you see here on this stage, myself as president, Donna as vice president, Helen as secretary, and Anthony as treasurer. The caucus started a couple years ago with a small group of school board members of color who identified the need to have a larger statewide voice in representing issues in education that affect students of color. Momentum for the caucus picked up, and at the end of 2018, OSBA school board members across Oregon honored the caucus with a voting seat on the OSBA Board of Directors. A definition of a network is a group of people who share a unifying issue and are focused on a common set of goals. Our caucus members, whether like Julie Esparza-Brown in the largest district, Portland Public, or myself on a board of a very small district, share a set of common goals and values. We mentor and support our members in dealing with education-related issues at both a local and a state level. Having members of color participate in community leadership is critical to a community's success. And what's critical to a student's success is seeing school districts and community leaderships, mentors that look like them, their families and their communities. Our constituents of color have leadership skills, but many are unsure how to step up or have been discouraged by events in the past. There still exist today systematic barriers for people of color to obtain leadership positions. Our caucus strives to create bridges for future leaders of color to cross the chasm and become part of the diverse leadership team for all of our communities in education. The filing deadline for Oregon to run for local school board is March 21st, less than 2 weeks from today. We hope people of color will choose to run in unprecedented numbers, knowing that their leadership will positively impact what our community values most, our children and our public schools. Now I would like each of our executive team to introduce themselves, state like your district, which we know, years on the board, number of students in your district, student demographics, and tell us why you became an education leader in your community. Let's start with Donna.
Well, this is Donna Tyner, and I have been serving on the Beaverton School Board since 2013. I'm in the middle of my second term that ends in 2021. Beaverton is the third largest school district in the state. We serve over 40,000 students. We have a majority-minority school population. Specifically, there are 48% students are white, 25% Latino, 16% Asian, 8% multiracial, 3% Black, and 1% are American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islanders. 27% are English language learners, 12% are students with disabilities, 35% are on the free and reduced lunch program, and 88 different languages are spoken in our district. I ran for school board because I believe that all students deserve equal access to educational resources, extracurricular programs, strong teaching professionals, well-maintained facilities, technology, and instructional materials. I wanted to do everything in my power to ensure that all students have the tools and resources they need for academic success.
Okay. Thank you. Helen?
Well, hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with you today. So I'm Helen Ying, and I serve on the Multnomah Education Service District Board. And so Multnomah Education Service District Board, the district itself, the agency, serves the entire Multnomah County, 8 component school districts. And believe it or not, I don't know if everyone in the room knows that 4 of the 8 school districts, namely Park Rose, Reynolds, let me look at my notes here, for the other 2, David Douglas and Centennial, they all have over 60% of their student population identify as children of color. And then the other 4 school districts, 2 of them, Portland Public being one of the biggest one, it actually serves half of our students in the county. It has 43% of the students identify as people of color. And then Gresham Barlow, to the east of the county, 42% also identify themselves as people of color. So that means out of the 8 school component districts, 6 of them have over 40% of students that identify as people of color. I don't have the long stats like what Donna has brought today, but at the agency, MESD, that is what we want to do. We want to serve this region, serve the students in this county with the services that I think Sam, who is our superintendent in the audience today, has often said is economy scale, right? So it's services that each district aren't able to do on its own. We'll cut together, we're stronger together, right? We could do that. So I ran for the MESD board is because I believe we need to serve our students better in these regions, particularly because of such a diverse number of that we have just shared with you, students that are non-white, but yet we have not focused our programs in our schools to meet their needs. So I decided to jump in and to do that, and I was elected in 2017. So I ran on 3 themes. One is I want to see that MESD to have more inclusive programming and to be more, to decide on its work from a more equitable lens. And secondly is to raise the awareness of MESD. I'm not sure how many of you in the room knows what MESD does. And today, serving here, hopefully will help to raise a bit of awareness of what Multnomah Education Service District does. And then thirdly, is to have metrics to measure the work of MESD. And I just want to say proudly that we're making gains in all 3 areas.
Anthony?
Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Medina, and I serve on the Woodburn School District. I'm Vice Chairman of the Woodburn School Board. I've been on the board since 2017, going on 2 years now, and we have about 5,000, a little over 5,600 students in our entire district. I ran because I'm passionate about representation, particularly community representation at the board level. And I'm proud of my district. As was mentioned earlier, we have the highest percentage of students of color in the state. Roughly 84% of our students across our district identify as students of color. But there are other statistics that I'm very proud about. Highest percentage of students of color in the state. We also have the highest percentage of administrators of color in the state, and we have the highest percentage of teachers of color in the state. And when you couple those things, you see results that we were able to see now, where we regularly have some of the highest graduation rates in the state as well.
All right, thanks, Kay. Go with me. Again, you know me, Bill Grow. So North Marion is that nice flat farmland between Wilsonville and Woodburn. And we have 1,934 students right at the moment, I think. One of the beauties of that is being the fact that our district is literally separated from the metro line by a golf course, but yet we are rural. The bus stop you come to kindergarten at our district is the same bus stop you will graduate as a senior. We're all on one little country block that we affectionately call the Haven off the highway. So, but it is small and we struggle and we have all the same rural stuff even though we're right there. The reason I've been on the school board since 2012, so about my seventh year coming in. I joined the school board because I knew we were having some controversies and discussions in the area, and I wanted to bring business and CTE kind of curriculum to see what was that. So I was really looking to see how I could integrate and help the schools from my metro professional background, but bring those skill levels into the school. And it just so happened at the time that a school board member got ill and needed their term to serve out, so I volunteered to serve that out, and 7 years later I'm still there. So, and then through other things of learning with OSBA and all the great education programs that OSBA had, I just kept getting asked to do more and more things, and one of these days I'll learn to say no, but it's not today. And so with that said, our school is definitely minority majority. And we definitely do not represent on our school board or our teachers, the nature of our community. Our community is really bimodal, where we have a lot of metro professional families that either choose not to live there or just don't want to be close to their work, bringing in metro wages, which is great. And then the other end of the spectrum, of course, is small minority business owners and agricultural farm families. So we have a real disparity there. One of the issues that brings is we took a survey of our minority students, and over 60% of them said they don't feel welcome in our schools, which is one thing we're heavily addressing. That kind of metrics and stuff that are really key for us and what we're doing. So other than that, that's kind of me and what we fight for. And then I do things at a state level. Some of you might know I'm on the Educator Advancement Council, and I do OEB, Oregon Educators Benefits Board, as well, to try and help our educators at the state level. So that's me. All right. Thanks. We're going to turn it over to some topic issues right now before we go into Q&A. I have some topics that I thought would be interesting to people. We're just going to have a conversation here about that, and then we'll chime in with some Q&A. Hopefully this will spark some questions from the audience as well. So I picked for our first topic for our panel here to tell us a little about either your own personal education experience coming through K-12, or maybe experience you're doing while raising kids in the Oregon area, of stories that you have that have led to positions you've taken and what you're doing about them as leaders in education. Why don't we start with, say, Anthony down there on the end, or just whoever, chime in.
I'll briefly talk about my background. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school, first in my family to go to college, and graduate from college. My dad was an undocumented immigrant and was deported when I was younger. My mom was 16 when she had me, so my grandparents raised me my whole life. And growing up, I went to a majority Latino school district, so I didn't know what it was like to be a minority until I got to college. And I said, where'd all my friends go? And that's when I got passionate about representation, particularly at points of access. I went to Western Oregon University, graduated my bachelor's degree in public policy administration, graduated valedictorian in my class, and went to Stanford and got my master's degree in education policy. Moved back to Oregon and moved to Woodburn, and my daughter became kindergarten age, and so she was ready to go to school, so we were really passionate about the district, and that's when I started, and that's when I ran for the Woodburn School Board.
This is Donna Tyner for those of you who are listening in. So the story I'm going to share is as a Beaverton parent, and I would say that this experience really resonated with me and was the reason why I ran for school board. When my son was in elementary school, he was just one of 2 black students in that particular classroom. I would at least volunteer 1 day a week. I was able to get away from work to do that, which is a blessing. However, one day the teacher stopped me, pulled me aside and said, I suspect your son is doing something wrong. Well, I asked her for specifics because I said, how can I address this issue with my son unless I know what behavior you're experiencing? I pressed her for specifics. She just told me she hadn't really observed anything. So I basically was shocked. And my response to her was, well, suppose your principal came to you one day and said, you're going to have a poor job performance, but doesn't give you any specifics as well, any specifics at all as what the basis of that poor job performance is based on. So she did back down, which is a good thing. I did leave it open, and I said, you know, continue to observe my son, and if you come up with some facts, I need facts, then I'll address the issue. Well, luckily, my son was unaware of the conversation. I, of course, made sure that I volunteered as many times as possible in that classroom, and I gave the teacher an opportunity to share any additional concerns with me. She never did. And of course, I've had other experiences as a parent in the Beaverton School District as well, and so it's really important to have a member of color on the to have a member of color on the school board, because a school board can be a platform where you can share your experiences with students and teachers and staff. It's a way where people can, where people that come before you with their concerns, they can feel validated. And of course, as a governing body, you're in charge of coming up with inclusionary policies, as well as looking at things through the equity lens.
So I'm going to just I'm not sure if my response is going to directly
No worries.
Talk about what Bill was mentioning, but you know, I just want to take you back memory lane when I was growing up here in Oregon. So my family moved to Oregon in 1971, and we moved from Seattle. Before that, I was in Hong Kong. That's where I was born. And so when I started school, it was at Jim Bridger, and in 8th grade here in Portland, I was like the only Chinese person in my class, and I don't think there was anyone else but white people in my class. So I was thinking, like, Monday through Friday, I want to be a white person. Like, literally, that's how I saw myself. And on the weekends is when I become Chinese again. And it was the same thing in high school, went to Marshall High School. And kind of like, just really want to blend in, be like everyone else, you know, because we didn't have a lot of diversity at my school. I had some friends that were Japanese American, Korean, you know, mixed race, but we could count everybody in the whole school probably on 2 hands. And so it was not a very diverse setting. And so you know, when I became an adult, I mean, so even though I'm an immigrant, even though, you know, our family spoke Chinese at home, but I chose to really focus on English. And I chose, over time, to raise our own children speaking only English, because at that time, it was like English only. That was the thing. People say, oh, you speak another language? Well, you're not so American, because Americans only speak English. I don't know if you remember that, but that's how it was when I was growing up. And so, you know, then when I became an educator myself, obviously I had to, you know, being a school staff, I had to do what our school board decided, right? What our administration decided, right? So, and even when I became administrator myself, it was like a lot of things that we had to address to that. You know, I was kind of like tied. My hands were tied, you know, in lots of ways. I couldn't just do things I wanted to do to address the needs of the children that I see every day. However, I'm so glad that I was an educator in our schools, because I know I've gotten this note from a student when I was a counselor at Cleveland High School. And I don't even know the student. Like, we didn't interface. But the note that she wrote and sent to me, she says, I saw you, and that made me feel so much more, you know, the sense of being included and being a sense of belonging in the school. Just because I'm Asian and she's Asian. And I was like, amazing to get that note from a student. And I know over time, I've made a lot of connections with students that they just identified, you know, with they were because of me being in the presence. So long story short, right now I get to do lots of things, not only helping to raise the visibility of people of color by serving on a school board or agency board, but I also get to serve. I don't know if you guys remember, in 2017 in our legislature we passed a law, the Ethnic Studies Bill, and it is now in the process of the first thing that this bill requires is to have an advisory group be put together by ODE, and for this group to come up with recommendations for the Department of for the State Board of Education. And so we've been meeting since November of 2017. It's been a long time. We're still meeting. And right now, this group has developed actually from scratch ethnic studies standards. And the reason we had to do that is because, okay, I'm not trying to slam ODE. I want you to recognize that. It's just that we're not, we have not equipped ourselves to actually do that, right? Because, so ODE went through a process of updating social studies standards. So they gave us a set of standard drafts. They said, this is what we want to present for the State Board of Education to adopt. And we looked at the standards. Yes, there are some standards called ethnic studies standards, but really it's a lot of them were just standards that were already there under government, under history, but it's just renamed to be ethnic studies. That's not what that bill is about. It's doing the same old, same old. And so today, when we talk about doing work differently in our schools, that is what we really need to do. It's not just call it equity lens and have it in the books, not call it equity policy and have it in the books and continue to do same old, same old, same old, same old. So as members of the school board member of color caucus, I often get the name mixed up here, the words, but I think it allows us to really be visible and raise people's awareness. I think when we walk in the room, it changes the the conversation.
I'll just give a short thing from my personal history. Of one of my memories in 8th grade was basically I grew up single mother of 5 who was an immigrant, and we lived in a housing project, East Coast. That's where governments put homeless people. And I was in geography class. We were teaching about maps of cities and how cities work and things. And when the map went up on the screen, one of the friends of mine wrote up, well, Glenside's not on your map. And the teacher said, well, nobody cares about Glenside, which is where I lived. So just those kind of memories involving cultural and understanding that we're all part of the community is key. But let's move on to another topic. Sorry. Yep. Okay. The radio reminder, is that okay? Let me take a break here for a moment, and I'm new at this, right? So for those of listening on the radio and maybe tailing on the internet, I just need to give a little quick reminder here. For our radio audience, this is City Club of Portland Friday Forum. I'm Bill Graup, a member of the North Marion School Board and president of the School Board Members Color Caucus. With me are the executive board members of the School Board Member Color Caucus, including Anthony Medina from Woodburn School District, Donna Tyner from the Beaverton School District, and Helen Ying from the Multnomah Education Service District. Second topic I'd like to bring up is we have a lot of metrics. We have a lot of metrics, right? But a lot of them are about education and achievement gaps, and a lot of those relate to diversity issues in our thing. So I just want to open up to the panel again. So what are some of the gaps that really stand out to you and how they're affecting your area and what you do? Let anybody jump in on that. Any thought takers on that subject? Got graduation gap, for example, poverty gap, things of that nature. How do those affect what we do in education as leaders?
Well, I would say for me the most troubling gap is the how discipline is applied. Most of you probably saw the Oregonian article today as it relates to Portland Public Schools now that they've hired police to manage the schools, and how there's overwhelmingly been more black students that have been arrested. In our school district, we too have a problem in that it's disproportionate amount of suspensions and expulsions that fall upon our black and brown students. This has always been a major concern of mine. I think that that's a contributing factor to student achievement, because if you don't feel safe and comfortable, how can you achieve? Of course, it also goes back to the mindset of a person perhaps misinterpreting your actions. I grew up in San Francisco. I, too, ended up integrating my neighborhood. My parents were fortunate enough to buy a home in a white neighborhood. So I know what it's like to be the only student of color in a class. You are visible. Whether you perceive that that you stand out because you're different than everybody else, but you do stand out, and you are treated slightly differently. I, of course, have the gift of gab, as my friends would attest to, and I speak a lot, but I would have the feeling like I was being treated differently than my cohort next to me, who would be talking just as much. So all this impacts students' ability to achieve and to focus in the classroom.
So I think, Donna, I think you're right. There's the gap of in terms of discipline, because I actually was a vice principal who did discipline when I was working. But I think there are other. Instead of talking about the gap itself, I want to actually talk about, or the gaps, achievement gaps and so forth. I want to talk about what we need to bridge the gaps. So, earlier I took some time to talk about ethnic studies. And the reason why it's so important that we do that in our schools is really to help not only our educators understand the students better, but to help students understand each other better, right? But also, besides that, we actually need to look at, because one of the things that I did when I first got on the board of MESD, I asked for data. So I chaired the Equity and Inclusion Committee for our board, and I asked for data. I said, let's look at the demographics of our students who we serve directly at MESD, and let's look at our general population across the region. Well, we have a high number of students that are special ed, that are people of color. We have a high number of students that are in alternative education schools that are people of color. We have a high percentage of youth who are incarcerated that are people of color. So we need to really look at, face the mirror, and say to ourselves, not just the educators, but every one of us in the room, when you look at these students are our future. What are we doing, right? And what is it that we really need to shift? I was meeting with a developer here in our city yesterday, because I also serve as Old Town Community Association chair. And he was talking about, I said, so he knows, coming in, I'm an educator in background, and he says, we need to do something about our schools. I said, yes, we need to fund our schools. And then, but he turns around, he says to me, he says, yes, I agree we need to fund our schools, but we need to have school reform. And I would say we have to agree with that too.
Any comments, Anthony?
Yeah, to speak on an attainment gap or any gap we see in the K-12 setting, I'll give an example particular to the Woodburn School District. And I've said it before and I'll say it again because I'm very proud of it. Highest percentage of students of color in the state, highest percentage of administrators of color in the state, and highest percentage of teachers of color in the state. And I'm not saying that to say once you do that, magic happens and student success increases. But what we were able to see in early 2000s, Woodburn School District had one of the worst graduation rates in the state. We are a very high farm labor community. But what we did in the mid-2000s was we integrated a K-12 dual language program in every single one of our schools across the district, not only in Spanish, but in Russian as well. We have a high population of Russian Orthodox students. And that took time. It's not something that we were able to look back and say, 2, 3 years later, we saw direct results. But we're seeing the results now, 10, 15 years later, of having a K-12 dual language program available to students and their families, and how that, along with having administrators and teachers of color, correlates to the successes we're having now.
Let me just add in one more topic here, and then we'll go to Q&A. So not just for school board members of color, but just school board members in general, how do we affect as school board members issues that students of color have? What can we do as school board members? For those in the audience who are not school board members, explain to them how we do that as board members. How do we affect these issues?
So I think, really, really important, I just keep harping on it. I might have said the same thing 3 times. We need to build understanding. We need to build capacity. We want to make our schools where students feel they are included and that they are valued. So what that means is we have to equip our teachers. We have to provide professional development for our teachers so that they can work effectively with the students that they have. They have to understand the students that they have in their classroom.
As a school board member, we are a governing body, so we do not get involved in the day-to-day or tactical operations of the school district. We set policies. We also can provide direction through questioning. So I would say that the biggest thing that we can do to move the dial is to make sure that we look at our policies and see what things we can do to make them more inclusive. We also, when we're looking at budgets, we also making decisions and asking the school district when they're coming before us and saying, this curriculum should be adopted. We need to question them and make sure the things that you're doing and the things you're trying to roll out, are you doing it from an equity lens? Are you making sure that everyone is at the table to make decisions, that there's just not only white people making the decisions? I hope I'm not being offensive, but that's pretty much the way it is. And one other thing is, before I got on the school board, I recognized that I did not really like what I saw as far as was in our school district's disciplinary handbook. I thought, for example, that the things in there were capricious and arbitrary. It didn't really set out how a teacher would approach their discipline and what principles they were going to apply. So I actually sent an email to the person in charge explaining to them, I think there needs to be a more holistic approach. You need to be looking at what the root causes are. You need to try to work with the student because it should be an educational moment. Everything in education, because we all come from different backgrounds. As we all know that each teacher has a different tolerance level. So having something specific in this handbook would be used as a good guide for the teachers and a reminder of how they're supposed to apply discipline. It's also good for parents because if they see that there's something in there, they'll know where the teacher is coming from. So at the time that you're having this discussion with the parent about the misbehavior of the student, you can come at it from a different angle. As a result of that, they actually asked me to sit on the revision of the handbook. And in essence, I was the first parent ever they had ever asked. And so I'm just saying we need to involve more members of our community on different things like that because it's really important to make sure that all voices are heard.
You want to say something, Anthony?
Yeah, to give a quick example, when I was elected, there were also 2 other Latinos elected in the Woodburn School District. And so in 2017, we made Oregon history. We were the first majority Latino school board ever. And we were very proud of that. And what we've been able to see come from that has truly been amazing. Over my 2 years on the board, while I was running, I would go to all the board meetings, and it was usually just staff, and I would sit in the back just because I wanted to hear the conversations that were happening. Now we're having a lot of community involvement, and I don't want to sound cliche and say that the community gets more involved when they have it's true, the community gets more involved when there's local elected leaders of color, but they're also more engaged. We have parents come and talk to the school board about their experiences in the district, which doesn't always happen. I don't know if other boards have teachers come and talk about their experience in the district, and some experiences are positive, and other experiences are critical. And to take that with an open lens, it's been a new experience for me. The last example I'll give, we had our student body who are students of color come to the board and say, our dress code is sexist, it's misogynist, and what can you do about it? And it was empowering to work with the students throughout the academic year to say, well, how would you like to see it? And they would bring us an example. We'd go back and forth on it a little bit, have our legal counsel take a look at it. But by the end of the year, those students were able to say, we have a new school board policy on dress code, and I haven't talked to the students since graduating, and they went on to college, and I'm very proud of them. But I really hope that their experience during that year process was empowering for them.
I'll add in, and it's, thank you. And I know I don't want to go to the national level, but just as you get into leaderships in your community, right, one of the important things, all these actions here, but also setting an example for our young kids of leadership with respect and honor is really important, to set those examples. And that's what great leadership does. And that's what you see up here, and what we're providing examples on. So, just to be able to put that up there. Some of you may have seen an article I wrote in the Oregonian, put out, and then the things of the other example is that you're showing a lot of your students in your community that upward mobility and the ability to transcend wherever you're at and any adversities you're facing can be accomplished. And here are examples of that, and setting those examples is really important as well. So as long as what we do on school boards, which is opening and breaking down systematic barriers, that cause issues for students, especially students of color, those are the actions we're taking. But we're also leading by example. So, I think I have to do the radio thing, and then I'm going to go to Q&A. So while I'm reading this radio spot, if you want to come to the microphone, that'd be great for our audience on the radio and online. This is City Club of Portland Friday Forum. I'm Bill Graup, a member of the North Marion School Board and president of the School Board Members of Color Caucus. With me on the executive board members of the School Board Member Color Caucus, including Anthony Medina from Woodburn School District, Donna Tyner from Beaverton School District, and Helen Ying from the Multnomah Education Service District. And with that, let's take our first question from the audience.
My name is Les Volstek, member of City Club and of our Legacy Society. My question regards budgeting. Do you fund each school in your district equitably by the number of students in each one, regardless of the racial mix?
So I can speak for the Beaverton School District. We actually view it from an equity lens. And we allocate additional resources to schools that are considered Title I schools. And so that's how we do it.
I'll just add, we are a Title I district, every single one of our schools.
So for MESD, our budgeting process is quite different than just one school board, because we actually serve our component districts, and a lot of our funding is actually tied to certain programs. So I'm not quite sure how best to respond to that. Yeah.
And I'm in a similar boat, because my district's so small, we only have one building for each of the grades. So of course each one gets the equitable funding, since we don't have a choice in that matter. Next question.
Carol Witherell, City Club member. I share your concern about police force members in the schools. And my question is, based on my reading of data around the country and in our own state, those schools that are using a strong restorative justice practices system that involves community members, staff, and students all have dramatically reduced their disciplinary problems. And can you give us some insight as to what you're doing in your districts or particular schools that are strong in that area?
I would say that in Beaverton, we do employ or apply restorative justice practices, but the rub is not every teacher does. Not every principal does. if there was some way we could get into the minds of people and they would apply it equally, that would be awesome. So although the school district, has an approach and preaches it, our superintendent does, I know a lot of our principals do, I still know that there are a lot of pockets that it doesn't really work.
Hello, my name is Sumitra. I'm running for Centennial School Board. I have two components of the question. I want to ask, what are the challenges you face running as a candidate of color, and also being on the board, oftentimes only a person of color on the board?
Oh, I would say, there are some challenges just, I can speak for being a black woman, going door to door. People often think I'm a Jehovah's Witness, for example. So that can be a challenge. Of course, you don't always know people's reticence from opening the door if they think you're going to be soliciting them or not. And then there's also, I just have heard time and time again in different venues how people say, only people who are experienced should run. But in essence, how do you get experience without running first? So just kind of changing that whole mindset would be awesome too. And I'm not sure I answered your other question.
What are the challenges that you usually face being a person of only person of color on the board?
Well, oftentimes issues do come up that are quite sensitive. And so you can't help but, kind of have empathy for people that are going through, different types of situations. And I guess a lot of it is, sometimes I guess myself personally, I just don't think that maybe the other school board members are listening the right way when I'm sharing something that I think is important and critical, because I might be viewing it from a different perspective than they are. And so the challenge is sometimes is just trying to get people to look at things differently and maybe act differently. That might be beneficial to students of color throughout the whole school district.
So I would just like to add one thing, is that I think sometimes people who don't know me, looking at, I'm a small person, a tiny person that's Chinese American, they have some assumptions about me, just looking at me. But then when I start talking, they're kind of like shocked, because I'm so direct and so assertive. And it's just like, I used to be called, she's tiny but mighty, that kind of thing. So I think it's just the assumptions that people have about you, just like what Donna was saying.
Quickly, before you go, first of all, I just want to say congratulations for making the decision to run. That's huge. For me, when I decided to run, a local nonprofit reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in running. That decision was hard, but it's well worth it, and I wish you the best during the process. As folks have talked about their experience door knocking, I have tons of bad experiences door knocking, but I had tons of great experiences as well. And it's an amazing opportunity to get connected to the district and the community, and you deserve to be there. I wish you well on your race, and I'm not sure if they give our emails out for this, but send me an email and I'd love to donate to your campaign.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, I have one question on the card here. Keeping it short here. So what are some ideas of keeping students of color engaged in the education process? What are things you can do as a school board member to help your students of color stay engaged in the education programs?
Well, it's important to have people of color, number one, serve on the school board. We also need to have more workforce educators, bus drivers, frontline people at the office, principals, teachers, in every aspect and every element of schools, because I think that when students see someone that looks like them, they feel more comfortable. Then in essence, there are lessons that these particular professionals have that they can share with the student and tools, because they can say, hey, I got here, you can too, this is what helped me?
So I just want to add one thing, is to have our content and our teaching and learning in our classrooms be more relevant to our students, where they feel more included.
Three quick benefits to having proper cultural representation in schools. First, educators have an opportunity to teach in culturally relevant ways. Students have an opportunity to ask more probing questions, and there's more invitation to share ideas and insight.
All right, another question from the mic.
Yes, hi. My name is Michelle DePass, and I'm also running for Portland Public Schools in Zone 2.
Awesome.
And I'm really excited about it. I'm a PPS parent, and I'm a product of PPS, but I also went to school in Mexico as a child. So I've been a minority in two different contexts, in two different countries, really. And I want to thank all of you for your equity work. I'm impressed and inspired to carry your torch. My question has to do with how we ensure that equity policies, Portland Public Schools also has an equity plan and an equity policy, yet our graduation rates are very, very low. So how do we ensure that these policies are implemented and activated and that they don't gather dust?
So I just want to give an example. As I said, I chair the Equity and Inclusion Committee, the board committee, and that's actually how we came about adopting the equity policy at MESD. We didn't have one before, but through the board work, we were able to do that. And now we actually are looking at making sure that we implement it. We're just taking parts of it and saying, how are we doing this in our agency? And really zeroing in on, not only having a equity lens at the board level, but an agency-wide equity lens, and also looking at the process of how it is developed, where our staff are actually going to, be the ones who are the ones at the ground level, being not only knowing about the equity lens, but being a part of developing the equity lens.
I would say that always making sure that you bring up at every opportunity that every decision you're making, you're doing it through the equity lens. In addition, I think I've lost my other thought. There's something else. Maybe it'll come back to me as I'm talking. Maybe not. It's not coming. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think you have a comment.
Three recommendations quickly that came to my mind. One, do what fits your district. Every district is different. So have that lens and think about your district, and try not to say this program or this process works in one district, let's try to replicate it here. Truly make it unique to your district. Two, which should have been number one, is that community feedback is priority. And so without that community buy-in, it's really difficult to implement new programs. And lastly, districts are not one size fit all, and neither are schools. So keep that local lens.
And with that, I did remember what I was going to say. In the Beaverton School District, we invite principals to come and give principal reports to our board. And I think that by asking questions every time a principal comes before you, including questions of equity at these sessions, and of course then they anticipate, they know, okay, we're going to be getting these questions when we come before the board, that really helps them then implement certain practices in their school, because they know they're going to be called into account.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Do we have time for one more? I have a card. Oh, actually, go ahead with the mic.
Thank you. Daniel Shelton with REAP, Youth Assistance Coordinator at Centennial High School. One thing that we see with our program, we're having a hard time getting families involved. Want to know, what do you guys do to keep the families engaged in order for them to help their students, children come to their programming or come to school or be involved in school and stay involved in school? We're seeing, again, our parents are poorly not showing up a lot of times, and so when we want to talk to the student, it's very difficult for us to get involved with the student because of the family dynamics. So do you guys see trouble with that? And if you do, if you have, what do you guys do differently working with families?
Well, I know in Beaverton we have something called an early warning system that we've just rolled out. And so we try to target students, based upon, how many students are coming to school, if they're missing lots of school, if they're not doing well in school. And we actually deploy our teachers to try to make a contact with the parents and try to see if they can talk to at least one adult who might be able to assist them in getting the child to school. There's many other different things that we do as a school district as well, but the most important thing I guess I was trying to say is just establishing that overall connection. I mean, parents want to do good by their kids, but it's the ability of a parent feeling comfortable. Number one, coming into an environment, a setting, in a school where they feel comfortable. And I know we've worked with our admin staff to make sure that people who are coming in from different countries or just somebody who's coming across town feels welcome in the school. And I think that that's half of it.
I'll chime in on one answer here. The thing we did in our rural school is we just had an idea from our superintendent, but somehow we scraped together a small amount of cash, and we hired a local guy who's our soccer coach as well, and he became our family outreach counselor. And so when we have kids in trouble, he will actually has the ability to go visit the family, find out what's going on, find out that kid who's behaving outright has an older brother who just got arrested. We get into the family and it's respected. We had the luck of pulling up a really respected community member. We get in this case, Spanish speaking. So we reach out, and what that did was it really upped our game just by you don't have to do it to everybody, but just the word spreads that you're engaging the family, and that position is now invaluable and does a lot to our records, and even our attendance records, things like that are now well understood. It's really helped our engagement, and now we have English language learning classes that are fully loaded, just because the word got out to the community that we were reaching out and saying, hey, we see this kid's in trouble, we want to come talk to you, how do we help you, how do we understand what's going on here? And it's amazing some of the very sad stories you find out that you would have never known about this kid that's acting out. And when you find that out, it becomes a solvable problem, and it's worth the money. It's hard for us small districts to do it, but it's worth every penny if you can.
And with that story of success, we will have to pause the conversation for today. As a reminder, the deadline to file to run for your local school board is Thursday, May 21st. Please join me in thanking Bobby Regan for producing today's program, Miller Nash and Hilltop for their support, and the executive, all of our speakers for their insights. Thank you very much.